to you from Jonesborough, Tennessee, the storytelling capital of the world, and broadcasting from the International Storytelling Center. It's Jonesborough's original storytelling radio hour, A Night with the Yarn Exchange.
At the Jonesborough Yarn Exchange, give us a story and we'll give it a name. We'll get them all together in a brand new play, then retell it the Jonesborough way. Let's get this started now. Toss me a ball of yarn, I'll show you how. I'll begin the story and then when I'm through, this ball of yarn gets held back to you. Pull the strand, and help me weave it through and then as you roll my story, then we start again. At the Jonesborough Yarn Exchange, give us a story and we'll give it a name. We'll get them all together in a brand new play, then retell it the Jonesborough way. Then retell it the Jonesborough way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm your host, Lori Olmsted. You know, every time we come to tell stories here at the International Storytelling Center, it's a special time for us all. But tonight, we are happy to give you some big news. The Jonesborough Yarn Exchange is now sponsored by the Tennessee Arts Commission through an Arts Project grant. Wow is right. We are so proud to have this support.
We'd also like to welcome Appalachian Light and Sound as a new sponsor to our program.
And where would we be without our longtime sponsor, the makers of parsley? That smooth, easy-going flavor that enhances every meal. Sprinkle it on or garnish a dish.
It just tastes better with parsley.
And moms, do mornings come all too early for you? Then frozen toast is the answer. From the freezer to the toaster, what would be simpler than frozen toast? Hit it, kids.
It's the breakfast sensation from coast to coast. What do you want for breakfast, kids? Frozen toast.
And of course, for the past year, Mountain States Health Alliance has been a major sponsor of our show and a huge supporter of our work in telling the stories of our community.
Tonight is an especially exciting occasion. Our episode, Good for What Ails You, features stories of healing and healers from all across these parts. It seemed like a great way to bring in several stories that come right out of the Mountain States, stories that were shared by actual volunteers and staff at the many locations of their services.
That's right, Tom. And between those stories, as well as the ones we have collected from community members both here and throughout the Appalachian region, we'll be giving everyone a good dose of what we do around here for health and healing. From doctors to granny healers, homemade remedies to tried and true cures. I think it's safe to say that the show tonight is going to be good for whatever ails you.
Dr. Stewart brought me into the world. I was born in an old Victorian house converted into apartments. I was put in a dresser drawer because Mama and Daddy didn't have any more beds. There are a lot of people who'd like to put me in a dresser drawer today.
Dr. Stewart brought me into the world too. Old Dr. Stewart. But I was never put in any dresser drawers.
Well, you had more money than we did. But I'll tell you something I bet you didn't know about Dr. Stewart. He not only brought children into the world, he made sure they had a good start at education. Every child he delivered for all those years, he would come by and see them just about when they would be starting school. I remember he came to our home and had a shoebox with shoes, brand new in them, just for me. It was the first brand new pair of shoes I ever wore. And he also brought me pencils and crayons, which I kept in the shoebox, enough to start school. I'll never forget that.
Doctors do have an impact, sometimes long-lasting. I was named by my doctor. My mother hadn't thought of a girl's name because Daddy told her we were going to have a boy. And the doctor said, I think she looks like a Betty Jean. And so that's who I am.
Dr. Stewart delivered me. He delivered pretty much everybody. I don't even know how many hundreds. Mama wanted to name me after him, but I am so glad he talked her out of it. I would be mortified to go around life as a Stewartina.
Granny Meadows delivered all Mama's children and named some of us. She named my brother
Franklin Delano Roosevelt Clark.
After he got older, he didn't want that name.
You try living up to that.
I think that's why she named you that, so that you would live up to it, at least try to. Granny believed any of us could become anything. And the older folks, they believed her when she said something was going to happen, because it was said she could see into the future. If she gave you a great name to live up to, you could expect that she saw great things ahead.
As long as you did your part.
At every visit, she told us that. My brother changed his name anyway. Granny Meadows named me too. I was always a little disappointed that I wasn't called Cleopatra. I think I would have tried to live up to that. She just named me Anne. Pretty ordinary.
Anne? Ordinary? I expect you must not listen to stories or do much reading. You look at all the Annes in this world and you'll discover they did great things.
Really? Like what?
That is for you to discover. Discover what they did and discover what you might do. You are capable of doing great things, Anne. Never forget that.
Everybody called her Granny Meadows, but she was my real grandma, and she delivered me too. She was there when everyone fell to a hush because I was born with a veil on my face. That's what my grandma called it. She's the one who raised me. She was kind of a medicine woman. She took care of folks, black and white. I went with her all over these parts. It was on one of these visits that she told me about the veil. We were walking home, and she got ahead of me. I saw something, a lady, a real fancy dresser. My mother was a fancy dresser too, so I thought it was her walking down the road. So I ran to her and called out to her.
Mama, Mama, over here.
She kept going. Then my grandma turned around.
Fanny.
I'm going to meet Mama.
No, Fanny, come here now.
I knew by the sound of Granny's voice that I needed to come back. All of a sudden, the fancy dresser turned and disappeared. Grandma and I walked a long time, maybe a mile, before talking.
Let's rest our feet here.
Granny, why wouldn't you let me go to her?
She isn't who you think she was, child. And this is not the right time of day to be walking with spirits.
You mean she wasn't real?
Oh, she was very real. As real as you and me. She once walked and talked on this earth just like we're doing. But she's on the other side of the veil now. Most times they just want to be remembered. They show themselves and that's that. Sometimes they need to pass on some news to people on this side. But every once in a while, there's one that wants something more. And you have to be careful.
Something more like what?
Oh, honey, when you get a little older, I might tell you. But I don't want to scare you now. That lady probably just wanted to be remembered. But I don't want you walking with a spirit when the time's not right. She should have known better. That's why I called you back.
How did she know I'd see her?
You were born with a veil on your face. I was too. You were born with half a veil. That means that you can see things, people, and ideas that used to be. I was born with a full veil. That means I see things toward the future.
And some things that I used to wonder about started making sense. How she would know if someone was going to get well or die.
Oh, like you said, Mrs. Jones probably isn't going to make it?
Oh no, honey. Only God knows those things. What I see are more like patterns and pictures. Take Mrs. Jones. If the patterns stay the same, if the weather stays damp and cold, and the cracks in her floors aren't covered, then that cough is gonna settle in her lungs. She'll be too cold to get up and move it out of her lungs, and then the pneumonia's gonna take her. Now, if that pattern changes, she's got a chance. But when we tended her, I saw her in her wedding dress. There's only 2 occasions a woman wears that dress. When she gets married and when she gets buried. And Mrs. Jones is already married.
Will I see the future too?
No, the half veil sees the present and the people from our past.
Too bad. I wish I could see the future.
My grandmother hugged me. It was my signal to know she was done talking. We'd walked that road together many times over the years to come. We'd walk it for Mrs. Jones' funeral. We'd walk it after Grandma delivered a set of twins and I got to help. I've seen a lot of things going down that road, but I never saw the fancy dresser again. One of these days, though, I'm sure I will.
My daddy was the town doctor in this little place in the foothills. We grew up without a lot of conveniences and without too much in the way of socializing since the nearest neighbor was miles away. Our remoteness gave us this sense of freedom, but when we moved into a bigger town, when Daddy was hired there as the new doctor, he carried some of those freedoms there, which were, well, a bit shocking to some of the residents. He'd often go out to get his paper in nothing but his boxers. There were other things.
Bleep, 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 bleep. Who blocked the bleeping driveway?
Like the swearing.
I only swear when it's appropriate. How many bleeply times do I have to say that?
Daddy was kept really busy with everyone in town, treating everything from runny noses to saw blade wounds to delivering babies, and he had little patience for nonsense. There was a lady in town that everyone knew to be a hypochondriac. There was always something deathly wrong with her, she just knew it. He was called to her home by her relatives, and Dad arrived. He looked her over and came to the conclusion everyone else had. He was very frank with her.
Lady, there's not a bleeping thing wrong with you. If you ask me, I think you bleep, 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 bleep.
On second thought, we won't use the language he used. Okay, so Dad looks her over, tells her in no uncertain terms, what he thinks of her condition.
I'm no bleepin' bleep bleep. If you ask me, I think you're the one who's bleepity bleep bleep. And more than that, you bleep bleep bleepity bleep.
Okay! So let's just say she returns the compliment. At that, she decides to tarnish his reputation by insisting his diagnosis is wrong and that she was going to die to prove it.
Won't you be bleepin' ashamed when they bleepity bury me?
She took to her bed and the family couldn't convince her to get up.
Well, bleep.
Being the shrewd psychiatrist he was, he gets his saline and sugar pills.
It seems I owe you an apology. You really challenged me.
I did?
Nobody called me that doctor before, and I got to thinking about your case. I decided that you have a rare disease.
I do? Well, bleep.
I didn't recognize it at first. I'm going to give you a shot, and I want you to take 3 pills a day. This should help you get back to normal. It'll probably take an hour before you feel anything.
He gave her a saline solution shot, and she was out of bed in 30 minutes. Every month for 4 months, she was given the same shot. She was kept well after that with sugar pills, which she took every day, and was never sick again a day in her life. And of course, after that, he was the greatest doctor who ever lived.
You're bleeping right, I was.
Good old Doc. Now, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to A Night with the Jonesborough Yarn Exchange on WETS 89.5 FM out of Johnson City, Tennessee. And we're back. Have you ever heard that music soothes the savage soul? Well, apparently it's good for other ailments too. In a Harvard blog in November of last year, it was reported that music therapy can reduce pain and anxiety, and it can improve quality of life for people with dementia. Now, that's a lot of benefit from doing something as easy as turning on the radio, or in our case, coming to the radio show and listening to our musical guests. Please help us welcome the Jonesborough Novelty Band to the stage for some hand clapping, foot stomping, healing sounds.
Thank you. I hope you all sing along. This song we're going to do is part of healing, in that the better you feel, the better happy you are, the better you feel. And this is called Accentuate the Positive. You've got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. McLean. Spread joy to the maximum, bring gloom down to the minimum. Have faith for pandemonium, liable to walk on the sea. To illustrate my last remark, Jonah and the whale, knowing the ark. What did they do? Just everything looks so dark. They said you gotta accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In Between. To illustrate that last remark, Jonah and the whale, knowing the ark. What would they do? Just everything looks so dark. They said you gotta accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In Between. Don't mess with Mr. In Between. Don't mess with Mr. In Between. This next one's a Woody Guthrie song, and my sister wouldn't. Phyllis is my. Where's Phyllis? She says we sing the song all the time. I could never be.
We do?
Yeah. So sing along. This land is your land. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the Rio Grande, redwood forest to the Gulf water. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highways, I saw the lovely, the endless skyways. I saw below me the golden valleys. This land was made for you and me. Everybody, this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and rambled, I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me the voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. The sun was shining as I went strolling, and the wheat fields waving, and the west clouds blowing. The flag was lifted, the voice was calling. This land was made for you and me. One more time. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me.
You know, you guys, it's really so much fun to have you here with us every single time, every time. The Novelty Band will be back in the show later on, but let's give them one more hand just right now. Okay, it's time to get back to more stories of healing. And healing is not always just about doctors and medicine. Healing comes in all forms. And around here it comes especially in the form of stories.
My great-grandmother lived to be 89 years old. Her name was Lou, and she spent her whole life taking care of other people. When she was 10 years old, she helped her grandmother farm all summer long to pay off the banknote and save her grandmother's house. When she was a young woman, she helped raise her younger siblings and then went on to get married and raise children of her own. She helped her husband run his business while she ran her own. And when her daughter went through a divorce, Lou helped raise her grandchildren, my father and uncle. She was a constant, never-changing figure in my father's life. She grieved with her daughter and grandchildren when she lost her husband. She grieved with my father and grandmother when my uncle died from an accidental gunshot, and grieved with my father again when my grandmother died of a brain tumor. Lou lived through the loss of her husband, daughter, and grandchild, lived through all that heartache with my dad. They mourned together through it all and still found beautiful ways to celebrate life through birthday parties and Christmases and through storytelling. She would tell all kinds of stories about when she was a girl in the 30s, about the way things have changed over time. But they were always stories about people and family, and she would remember every detail. The people she had lost weren't gone. They were there in her stories and in her heart. My dad stayed by her side over the years through countless surgeries and doctor's visits. During her second hip replacement surgery, she went under anesthesia. And as some of you may know, symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's can be worsened by anesthesia, and that's what happened. So my father came by to visit her at the hospital, worried that she may have lost memory of where she was and who he was. Their conversation went something like this.
How you doing, Nana? You feeling all right?
Yes. Feeling fine, I suppose.
How's your memory doing?
I remember you, don't you worry. Now shut that door and come over here. We need to have a talk.
Nana, the door will be fine open. What do you want to talk about?
I asked you to shut the door. Shut it. Good. Now come sit over here beside me and we are going to have a talk.
What about? What are we going to talk about?
I know why I am here.
Well, why are you here, Nana?
Because I'm going to have a baby.
You're what?
I'm having a baby and it's yours.
Nana, I really got to go now.
No, sir. You're going to sit right here and we are going to talk about what to do with this baby.
Nana, no, I've got to go. I'll see you tomorrow.
And he did come back the next day, but this time in a brand new truck.
How you doing today, Nana?
I'm feeling fine. How are you?
I'm just great, Nana.
Everything seemed like it was back to normal.
Good to see you looking healthy again. Have you been entertaining yourself?
Well as I can. What have you been doing today?
Well, let's see. I did some work this morning, then I bought a new truck.
A new truck? Well, I just can't believe you. A new baby on the way and you've gone out and bought a truck. And just how do you think we're going to afford that?
Even though she didn't remember exactly who my dad was, she still knew she loved him, even if it was a different kind of love. She thought her grandson was her husband, even though her husband had been gone a long time. She saw him so vividly because he was still alive, in her memory, and in their legacy, her grandson, who was sitting there holding her hand as she remembered them all. She kept them alive through her memories and the stories she told, stories that were always about family and always about hope. Now I realize it's my turn to keep her alive in the same way. And perhaps, in 70 years, I may be sitting with my grandchildren, her great-great-great-grandchildren, and they will get to know her too. I hope so.
They call me the Cookie Lady. I am the Cookie Lady of Sycamore Shoals Hospital. I come in and get to work in the kitchen, baking dozens and dozens of cookies. Then I put on my little apron, load the cart up, and go through the hospital giving away cookies. A lot of people say, well, how much are they? And I tell them, nothing, they're free, please take one. I give them out to patients, and I also give them out to staff. Sometimes a doctor or a nurse will have a really hard day. And I'll come by with my cart of sweetness and offer them a cookie. It might be the only sweet moment of the day they've had. I love to see the smile in their eyes when they bite into the cookies I bake, and I feel like in that moment they are wrapped in a big hug from me to them. That's what it's about, to show them that someone cares, that we care, and that no matter how hard everything is, there are still sweet things waiting around the corner.
I volunteer too. Once a week, I take my therapy dog to the Cancer Treatment Center. You would not believe the calm that the dogs bring. Patients could be having a really hard day, but they can sit and pet the dog and not have to say a word. And the dogs, they just seem to know when people need them. I remember one time we were on our way into the center, still in the waiting area, and my dog stopped, turned back, and went over to a lady looking out the window. This woman had lost a son a few months before in a bad accident, and now her husband was being treated for cancer. The dog started to nudge her and lay her chin gently on the lady's knee. I tried to excuse us, but she softly said, No, it's okay. And she and the dog sat together for a long time. When we left, she looked more at peace. The tears were gone from her eyes. but mine were full.
Beep, beep. Just a minute.
Bertie Drugstore in Elizabethton, Tennessee was established in 1892 by pharmacist Harry Bertie. Later, Max Jett began working for Mr. Bertie as a staff pharmacist in 1927. They were partners for many years. Mr. Jett became the sole owner after Mr. Bertie's death in 1952. Then Larry M. Prophet began work as a pharmacist for Max Jett in 1969. Then later bought the business from him in 1971. Bertie Drugstore was moved from downtown to its present location in 1975. It has been owned and operated for the past 43 years by Mr. Prophet. The business was built on the promise of providing quality drugs at competitive prices with quick service, and it's still practicing this today. Over 120 years after its start, they are still serving the same community. I've gone there for years, and I remember when they put their drive-through window in. It caused quite a stir at first, and then everyone wanted to use it.
Beep, beep.
What did you bleeping say?
I said beep. Can't you see I'm driving? I said beep as in beep, not bleep as in something you might say, Doc. Beep, beep.
I'll be there right away, Miss Mavis. Bertie's drive-thru started sort of unofficially at first. A lot of older people would drive to the drugstore and beep their horns in the lot. They'd never get out of their cars or even stop. They just beep beep. Well, we'd bring their prescriptions or other orders they'd called ahead for. Others saw that, and pretty soon it wasn't always the older customers who came by and beeped their horns. So, to keep us from running back and forth between the drugstore and the parking lot, we finally put it in a drive-through window. People still sometimes beep their horns, but I don't feel like I need roller skates anymore to do my job. Beep beep! I'm coming! Service with a smile, even when they're beeping the bleep out of you.
Thanks, Anna. I've been to the historic Bertie Drugstore in Elizabethton, and it really is remarkable to be in a business that you know has been around for over 120 years. It speaks to the traditions that are handed down in this region. Coming up, we've got someone who knows all about traditions and stories. A regular teller at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesborough, Tennessee, recipient of the Detroit Jewish Woman Artist of the Year, and this week's Teller in Residence. Please help me welcome to the stage Corinne Stavish.